Aladdin, my childhood Disney movie, and honestly still one of my favorites, if not my favorite. But did you know there were 2 direct-to-DVD sequels? Odds are 50-50. But I did, and my Aladdin obsession as a child led to me watching them years back. Which is why I decided to rewatch them after I had finished rewatching the original just today. And they held up, surprisingly. Maybe I'm blinded by nostalgia, but I actually enjoyed a lot of aspects of both sequels. Do I think the Aladdin sequels are better than the original, or even close? God, no. But I think they're often ignored and brushed under the rug, and they aren't as bad as they're usually portrayed. But before I get into that, let's talk about what I liked about the first movie and the history. Oh yeah, by the way, spoilers for a 30-year-old movie and its direct-to-DVD sequels if you're a weirdo and you care about that. If you only want to see stuff about the sequels, skip to the timestamp on screen right now. And I know it's contrived for me to say, but if you like the video, I'd really appreciate if you could like and subscribe. It helps me know if you guys like the content I'm making, and it helps motivate me to make more videos like this. But with the shameless self-promo out of the way, I really hope you enjoy the video. Aladdin came out in 1992 to overwhelmingly positive reviews, and it became the highest grossing film of the year with a whopping $504 million in ticket sales, which was a record at the time for an animated movie. Well, for the other movies, I'm gonna quickly go over the plot. I'm gonna guess you wouldn't have clicked on this video if you haven't seen Aladdin. But hey, maybe you're just a mindless fucking shell of a human who randomly clicks on videos. One of the main things I really like about Aladdin is how the characters actually have depth. One of my consistent complaints with Disney movies is how tropey the characters can get, but Jasmine is, written like an actual person, and not just a damsel in distress. Hell, Aladdin is saved by Jasmine in this movie more than the other way around, which is really refreshing. Feminism. F yeah. But speaking of depth, almost all of the characters have depth. None of the major characters are entirely morally good or morally bad, except Jafar, who's kinda just a dickhead for minimal reason with no redemption for the entire movie. At least Iago is funny and has the motive of wanting Jafar's approval, but that's besides the point. Aladdin, the main character of the movie, proceeds to consistently lie, steal, fuck every other character in the movie over, and is still portrayed as the hero. And people wonder why my generation has funky ethics when we grew up on this shit. But honestly, I'm happy how they wrote Aladdin. I think that's why I liked this movie so much. Besides just being the ultimate simp. He just like me for real, for real. He grows and changes for the better, and as you'll find as this video goes on, I am a sucker for redemption arcs. Aladdin is still the same person as he was at the beginning of the movie, no matter how much he tries changing to impress Jasmine. The real change he had to make was being true to himself and being honest to those around him.
For the first time in my life, things are starting to go right.
He just like me for real, for real. Another thing this movie absolutely nailed was the soundtrack. Oh my god, the soundtrack! I would argue Aladdin has one of the best Disney soundtracks. You all know the songs, but all of them are just really satisfying to me to listen to. This movie also gets extra points for me for having 2 of my favorite voice actors in it, Gilbert Gottfried and Robin Williams. Were some of my favorite voice actors. Overall, the movie ties up all the loose ends except Jafar still being very much alive and very much all-powerful, but that's what a sequel's for, right? Well, the big messages of this movie are pretty obvious and talked about a lot, like being true to yourself, etc. One of the more brushed over ones is how when Jafar wishes to be a genie, it wasn't absolute power corrupting him absolutely that was his downfall. It was wishing to be the best in the world at anything left him with the consequences of being trapped with nowhere else to go. And I think that's an awesome message, or hey, maybe I'm delusional. Huh? God, I must be losing it.
Eyes on the prize. Eyes on the prize. Isn't that right? Animal Crossing trademark KK Slider.
I knew I could count on you, buddy. The Return of Jafar was released in 1994, only 2 years after the first movie, to mostly negative reviews. Most reviewers said the movie didn't have the same charm as the first, and maybe I just went in with expectations below the floorboards, but I actually thought this movie kind of had its own charm that was enjoyable. Besides the huge dip in animation quality, Agrabah felt equally as alive and vibrant as the first movie to me. and actually built on the world quite well. The Return of Jafar was actually intended as a prequel to an Aladdin TV show that aired, but I didn't watch that because I in fact have better things to do than watch 86 episodes of Aladdin that are not on Disney+. But if you guys really like this video, maybe I'll watch it and make a video on it. Most of the original cast returned for The Return of Jafar, except notably Robin Williams as the genie. While the new actor for the genie was no Robin Williams, he wasn't half bad. Like, hey, it wasn't like they recast him as Will Smith or something crazy like that. While Robin Williams returned for the next sequel, he opted not to for this one because of a contract Disney broke with him during the first Aladdin, which is actually a really interesting story, but it's a whole side tangent. Maybe I'll talk about it in a future video if I'm feeling silly goofy enough, but let's run through the plot of Return of Jafar real quick. The movie starts with a reprise of Arabian Nights, which is in fact certified baller as f***. Aladdin stops a group of thieves led by a new character, Abbas Mal, and gives away their stolen treasure to the people of Agrabah. Iago escapes the lamp but refuses to help Jafar escape, which actually sets up Iago to have the most interesting character arc out of any character in the movie by far. But I'll get into that in a second. Iago flies back to Agrabah, in which we learn the shopkeepers have become massive cowards since the first movie, since they've downgraded from cutting people's hands off to throwing watermelons at them. Iago accidentally saves Aladdin during an attack by Abbas Mal, and as gratitude, Aladdin promises to talk to the Sultan about at least getting him a fair trial. Aladdin proceeds to show that he's learned nothing from the first movie and lies to Jasmine about Iago being at the palace. Well, I thought for a bit this was out of character for Aladdin to go back to old habits. It honestly feels like natural character progression. It's not like a magic switch was flipped that made him a better person. This movie portrays Aladdin as a flawed person who's trying to grow, but it's not always a linear path forward to growth. Abbas Mal stumbles upon Jafar's lamp, and Jafar manipulates him into enabling him to exact revenge on Aladdin. Jafar honestly stands as the main character with the least depth in this movie. His goal is only revenge. The genie returns to Agrabah after traveling the world because he missed his friends, and honestly, they ruined the genie in this movie. I'll give this movie credit where it's not really given credit, but I'll admit they made the genie annoying and seem self-centered, which he wasn't really in the first movie. I kind of wonder if this was like a passive-aggressive jab at Robin Williams because he refused to come back to voice the character, but that's a whole different conversation. The Sultan announces Aladdin as the new royal vizier to replace Jafar, which, spoiler alert, Aladdin turns down at the end of the movie, which is some of the most in-character writing of the whole movie. Aladdin never wanted riches or power, he just wanted to live comfortably. Aladdin asks the Sultan to pardon Iago, and the Sultan reluctantly agrees to a temporary pardon to see if Iago has really changed. But Jasmine is rightfully angry that Aladdin lied to her. Jafar at this point sneaks into the palace to threaten Iago and force him to convince Aladdin to take the Sultan to a waterfall to get the Sultan taken hostage. When his plan succeeds, all of the main characters, besides Aladdin, are taken hostage by Jafar, and he frames Aladdin for the Sultan's alleged murder. Right before Aladdin is about to be executed, Iago helps free the genie, who saves Aladdin and reveals Jafar can be killed if the lamp he's trapped in is destroyed. Iago finishes his character arc by destroying the lamp. That was a lot. I honestly believe all of the characters held the same depth they did from the first movie, except Iago, who gained far more. Iago started the movie as being the same character he was during the first, but when he realized he wasn't chasing Jafar's approval anymore, he had to gain self-respect and discover who he truly was. My biggest complaint about the first Aladdin was how little screen time Iago got, even though he was a pretty interesting character. Boy, did they fix that! Not only did they give Gilbert Gottfried one song, they gave him 2 out of the 5 songs in the movie. Well, some may rightly complain they do not want to hear Iago scream sing as Gilbert Gottfried tears his vocal cords apart in live time. I actually wasn't too opposed, because the songs in this movie are actually kinda good. Iago's songs reminded me of the Beetlejuice musical, mostly because of his voice. Honestly, most of the songs in this movie were really solid, and I found them stuck in my head. I'll hand it to the movie. The soundtrack really captured the feeling of the first. Besides Aladdin cosplaying as a beggar for half the movie for the sake of marketing, I actually thought all the characters had decent character development. and it made sense where their characterization went. I was also kind of a fan of the fight choreography in this movie. I know it's an animated movie, but it was still pretty visually appealing to me.
My thumb is #1 on every list.
Jafar, what the absolute fuck does that mean? That is some Kanye shit.
We've almost made it, buddy. We've almost made it to the magic lamp. And then I can finally wish I made a funny cutaway montage instead.
Aladdin and the King of Thieves was released directly to DVD in 1996, 4 years after the original and only 2 years after the return of Jafar. Based loosely on the fairy tale Alibaba and the 40 Thieves, but with Aladdin instead, because Disney. Aladdin and the King of Thieves was released to mostly negative reviews, but with most reviewers saying it was better than the return of Jafar, which I do not agree with. While there's still good in this movie, specifically the soundtrack and more character development, and it surprisingly felt like a natural place for the story to go, I still feel it's the weakest of the trilogy. While this movie feels a bit cheap, especially production-wise, delving into Aladdin's past and focusing on his wedding feels like a perfect finale to the story. Let's do a run through of the plot, shall we? Aladdin and Jasmine's wedding gets interrupted when the 40 Thieves, led by the King of Thieves, shows up to steal a magic staff that contains the Oracle, which lives in the staff and can answer one question from each person about anything. Aladdin stops the 40 Thieves, and upon meeting the Oracle hints all of his questions about his past can be answered by his dad, and good old Papa Aladdin has been missing for years and left Aladdin with a knife as the only memory of him, which explains a lot about Aladdin. Aladdin asks where his dad is, and it said that he's trapped in the world with the 40 Thieves, which is a good roundabout way of not having to admit that the guy who very clearly is shown as Aladdin's dad is in the same fucking clothes as the King of Thieves. When Aladdin follows the 40 Thieves to their hideaway, he discovers the thing that everyone with a brain watching this movie found out 10 minutes earlier, that his dad, Kasim, is the King of Thieves. After they reunite, this guy, Saluk, who is definitely not very visibly the big bad evil guy of the movie, tries killing Aladdin for breaking and entering. Kasim stops him and suggests Aladdin fights Saluk because if you kill a member of the 40 Thieves, you can take their place, apparently. Aladdin, of course, wins because there's still an hour of this movie left, and he joins the 40 Thieves, along with an absolutely baller song that got shoved into one of the least known Disney movies ever. And Kasim reveals why he left Aladdin and his mother was to get this real fancy treasure called the Hand of Midas that can turn anything into gold to hopefully pull their family out of poverty. And he was trying to take the Oracle to find where the Hand of Midas is. Aladdin tries convincing his dad to come back to Agrabah and live a, quote, honest life, end quote, which is really fucking ironic coming from Aladdin of all people. But guess what? Saluk is still alive because of course he is, and he goes to Agrabah to sell the thieves out in exchange for, you know, not being arrested. That fucking guard from the first movie? He's here, and he found out Aladdin is a member of the 40 Thieves, as well as his dad, and when he goes back to the palace to let the Sultan know, he catches Kasim trying to steal the Oracle. Again, along with Iago, because they're fucking idiots, and apparently being married into the royal family wasn't enough money. Kasim and Iago are imprisoned. Aladdin frees them both, but gets caught. While all three of them flee Agrabah, Aladdin goes back to take accountability because he's stupid, and he gets off with 0 consequences. Somehow. When Iago and Kasim get back to the 40 Thieves hideout, they get captured by Saluk, who is convinced the remaining thieves who weren't captured that it was Kasim who sold them out. And they force them to take them to the Hand of Midas, which is really just on the back of this giant f***ing turtle. Incredible. Iago escapes and tells Aladdin and friends that Kasim is in danger, and they all go to the giant f***ing turtle to rescue him. Aladdin and Kasim meet up and get the Hand of Midas, only for Saluk to jump on in, as he does, before getting touched by it and getting turned into gold. Awesome. Kasim realizes how much the Hand of Midas has cost him and throws it at the boat with the remaining 40 thieves on board and just f***ing kills all of them. They're all dead. He killed them. Killed all of them. Aladdin and Jasmine finally get married for realsies this time. Iago and Kasim go off together on the run from the law, cause why not? And the movie ends with another Arabian Nights reprise, which is honestly a fire way to end the movie. Honestly, this movie wasn't as good as the second, and definitely not as good as the first, but I still enjoyed watching it more than I thought I would. It felt more like a spin-off of Aladdin than a proper sequel, and the vibes were definitely different than the first two. But for what it is, it's better than how bad I was expecting it to be. They fixed the genie's problem from the second one and made him more similar to the first movie, which was probably because Robin Williams came back to reprise the role. Thank God. While the songs weren't as consistent as Return of Jafar, the bad songs were kind of really bad, and the good ones in this movie were way better than they deserved to be. Overall, Aladdin 2 and 3 were pretty decent follow-ups to the first. Of course, no direct-to-DVD sequel was going to top the original, but going in with zero expectations left me pleasantly surprised, and I actually feel these movies get too much shit for being a bit better than mid, even though they're kind of carried by how good the soundtracks are. I'm being serious, listen to the soundtracks because I can't play them without getting copyright striked, and they're pretty good. I say if you've got nothing better to do and you liked Aladdin, give these a watch, but I probably will not be watching them again soon.
It's right here. The map says the lamp is right here. Any second now. Any second, Genie's gonna come out of the lamp. Huh. Should we call somebody?